Here we go. Alrighty, so the live stream is preparing, which I think means it's ready to go because I think there's a little bit of a delay on it. So I wanted to welcome everyone to our little cozy cooking club tonight. I know that we have done some events with Leah in the past, and we were all, oops, there's me talking over myself. That means the stream is working. So I'm gonna spotlight Leah. What we'll do is anyone cooking along with us tonight? Any hands-on folks? Or just not yet?
It's okay if not.
Perfect. Okay, so we are going to get right into it and get cruising. And then we'll definitely have time for questions, and people can always unmute and ask things or drop things in the chat. And if you drop it in the chat, if I can always let everyone know as they come on. I see Mary just came on too. Perfect. All right. So enjoy, everyone. Happy Passover.
Okay. Should I just take it away?
Yeah, just dive in.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thanks everybody. I was actually sort of wondering, like, are people actually going to show up when there's just a couple of days before Passover? So if we are a more intimate and smaller group tonight, that is totally fine. I have led now, dozens of these demos for as few as 2 people for a private event and as many as 1,000. And honestly, on Zoom, you don't feel the difference. So whoever is here is welcome, and I'm excited to cook with you guys. So just by way of quick introduction, my name is Leah Koenig. My mom is on the Zoom tonight, my mom. And I'm a food writer and cookbook author. I'm the author of 6 different cookbooks. They're all hanging out here. My most recent one is called the Jewish Cookbook. This one came out about a year and a half ago, and is a kind of global tour of Jewish cuisine. I always joke that aside from Antarctica, Jews have lived and cooked just about everywhere. So the cuisine that we eat is diverse and rich, and very, very different, whether you're obviously, Ashkenazi like myself, or Persian, or Moroccan, or Ethiopian, or wherever you're from. Your food is going to look very different. But what ties us together is we all celebrate the same holidays, and we all cook and feed our families, feed ourselves during non-pandemic times, probably have much bigger Passover seders. During pandemic times, have smaller or completely virtual seders. But now that we're entering our second year of COVID Passover, it's kind of crazy to believe. But I feel like we're weirdly all experts on how to have some joy during this otherwise very difficult time. So I hope that tonight brings a little bit of joy into your living rooms or kitchens, wherever you're watching. The 2 recipes we're going to make tonight are from 2 of my different books. The first is called a mina, which is a matzah pie with leeks and spinach. And that comes from this book here, The Little Book of Jewish Feasts. It actually is, it's part of a 3-book series, and they are actually very little. They're very cute little petite books. I love them dearly. So that's where the first recipe is coming from. And the second one, which is a chocolate dipped fig recipe, is coming from Modern Jewish Cooking, which I wrote in 2015. So we'll get to that one in a second. But what I wanted to do tonight is, a lot of the time, people spend a lot of energy on what they're going to cook for the seders. They have their soup, and they have their brisket, and their, all their side dishes kind of planned out. And then we sort of forget about the rest of the week. We forget that there's many, many days of Passover, and we need to eat well. So the dish I wanted to show you tonight it's a vegetarian dish. It has a lot of cheese in it. So it would, if you do keep kosher, it's not suitable for serving at a meat meal. If you have a vegetarian seder, it's a great main dish. But it's traditionally served in Sephardic communities as a kind of like a brunch dish. But for my family, we serve it a lot as like a vegetarian main dish during the week. Here is a picture of what it looks like. It is basically, if you've ever made a matzah lasagna before, those are kind of in fashion these days. You'll be familiar with the concept when we start to make it. It is basically a layered matzah pie. And just by way of very quick history, Sephardic Jews, particularly from Turkey, from Spain, from Greece, from North Africa, have this sort of love affair with savory pastries, with barekas and ulemas and boyos, and they have this wonderful pastry called pastelitos, which are literally like little double-crusted meat pies that are served throughout the year. And these Jews love their savory pastries so much that they cannot go the week of Passover without them. So instead of having them in the traditional way, they've developed really creative kind of layered matzah pies where the matzah becomes the crust. And they're really, really delicious. So they have two different versions that are kind of the main versions. One is a savory lamb, ground lamb, tomato sauce, cinnamon, often kind of like a cinnamony tomato lammy mina. I have a recipe for that in this book. And then the one that we're making tonight, I actually don't like it as much. I don't love the flavor of lamb, and I find it a little bit too rich, but I love this one because it's very light, it's very springy, despite all of the cheese and stuff in it. It's very kind of almost an effervescent main dish. So we will start to make it. Okay, so.
While you're prepping, there was one question in the chat that maybe you can address at some point throughout, which is if you have a smaller crowd, instead of a 9x9 or an 8x8, what kind of modifications can be made to go even smaller?
Well, this is actually, this is made for a crowd. It is a 9x13 pan. You could easily have this dish and do it in a 9x9. I feel like that's a decent size, even if you're having 2 or 3 people, or just even yourself and you have good leftovers for the week. So you can have this recipe for sure, and just do it that way.
Thank you.
Sure. I was joking with Eileen, like I wasn't really thinking when I suggested this dish that I'm going to have this dish like to eat the week before Passover. It's kind of a weird time to have a giant matzah pie like the week before you're going to eat a lot of matzah. But, so it goes. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grease my 9x13 dish. You can use a spray if you want, but since I'm using butter in the dish, you can also just use oil, like just brush it on. But I like to just use a stick of butter to kind of butter the sides of it. And I'm going to preheat my oven to, let's see, 350. And I have here a skillet, a very large skillet that I'm going to melt my butter in. It's going to happen off screen, but I promise I'm going to show you at different points along the way. And into that, actually, I'm going to just show you what I'm putting in. Into the skillet, the butter's going to melt. I have 2 chopped shallots. Let's see. This is a giant shallot, but if people aren't familiar with shallots, they're similar to onions, but they have a milder flavor. And you can absolutely use regular old onions for that instead, but I like to have that kind of mild flavor. And then I also have leeks. So leeks, in Sephardic tradition, these minas are often made with seasonal produce because that's what was available when they were being developed. Leeks and spinach are a very common combination and kind of a springy combination. So this is 3 leeks. It looks like a lot, but this is basically the filling for the pie. So that's what's going to go in there, and that's going to go onto my stove, and it's going to cook down while we do everything else. That's going over a medium, let's see, is it medium or medium high? Medium heat. Okay, so we're going to let that go while I do everything else. And if anyone has ever used leeks before, you probably are familiar with the fact that they can be very dirty, very gritty. Kind of like basil, they tend to have a lot of like the earth they were grown in still clinging to them when you get them. So what I like to do is slice them and then throw them in the colander, and you can kind of like almost pop out the slices. And when you rinse, you really get all of the little bits of grit and dirt out. But you want to make sure you really clean your leeks well, because you don't want like a gritty pie. It goes without saying. That's not delicious. Okay, so while that is going, I'm also going to add just a quick pinch of salt to that, because the salt helps to kind of soften the leeks a little faster, and it adds flavor. But this is not the main salt. It's just a little pinch to get things going. Okay. So while that's going, we are going to prep all of our other ingredients that are going to go in. The first is oregano. We want 1 tablespoon of finely chopped fresh oregano. And you can absolutely use dried oregano if you don't want to find fresh. But I love fresh oregano. I don't know if you guys can see. It's so vibrant. It smells so good. It's a completely different animal than dried oregano. It's pretty easy to find in the stores. And I put it in everything. I put it in like salads, almost as like a salad green. I'll just like take off the leaves and kind of like rip them up a little bit. I put it in, marinades for different things. It kind of gets used up very quickly in my house. But if you would prefer, you can definitely use 1 teaspoon of dried oregano for the tablespoon of fresh that I'm using tonight. So I'm just going to pull the leaves off. It's okay if the little, the softer stems stay, but you don't want the kind of woody stem in the middle. So this part I'm going to dispose of. And I'm just going to give that a nice chop. And you don't even have to, I'll measure out my tablespoon, because when I'm developing recipes for my cookbook, I'm very, very careful to measure everything very fastidiously, and to make sure that everything kind of all the I's and T's are dotted and crossed, because I want the recipes to work. But when I'm cooking at home, I just eyeball everything, which I know a lot of people do as well. So I've got my tablespoon of oregano right there. And I'm also going to use 4 cloves of garlic. Obviously, you've seen fresh garlic before, but I do want to say there are a couple of different sort of quick garlic options. Some are okay, and some I would kind of not recommend that you use. So fresh garlic is obviously going to be the best in terms of flavor. Just so you know what I'm doing, I have my garlic clove. I'm taking my flat knife and the fist, and I'm just going to press down. And what that does is it releases the clove from the little wrapper very, very quickly, and without a lot of strain. So that's what I'm going to do for all of my cloves.
Could we have a garlic appreciation to your recipe that you actually say 4 cloves? Because I'm sure everyone sees a recipe and they're like, oh, 2 cloves of garlic, and we all put in at least 4 or 5. So the fact that you baselined it at 4 is like so realistic, and I think that's amazing.
My mom recently told me there's this cake that we have in our family called, it's a chocolate chip zucchini cake, and the recipe calls for 3/4 cup of chocolate chips, and she's like, I always use a cup, like what's the harm? I feel it's the same way for chocolate chips and garlic. You always want to do more than what the recipe actually tells you. So yes, garlic appreciation for sure. But so there's a couple of different options. I'm sure you've seen in the stores like the little jars of chopped garlic that's floating in this sort of like murky liquid. It kind of looks like a gefilte fish jar, except it's garlic, but it has about the same amount of appeal. In that it just kind of has taken all of the life out of what is supposed to be this very kind of fresh, pungent, delicious smelling ingredient, and it kind of saps the life out of it. So I always say avoid the bottled garlic like the plague. They also often add like citric acid or some kind of regulator to make it last longer, and it just doesn't taste good. But if you don't want to chop fresh garlic, I understand. It does make your fingers smell garlicky. What you can do is, I think it's Perig, or there are certain brands that make frozen garlic, where they actually chop it for you, and they just freeze it almost like in little mini ice cube trays. And those retain, sorry, I'm just stirring my leeks while we talk. I'm still here. Those actually retain the flavor of the garlic really nicely. So I would say if you want to take a garlic shortcut, you can definitely go with frozen.
I'm literally gonna screen share the one that we use, which is the Dorot brand.
Dorot,
yeah,
that's what it is. I thought it was
little ice cube tray full of tiny little garlic cubes.
Yeah, those work great, and they just kind of pop right out, just like an ice cube. And they do make.
I get mine at Trader Joe's.
Oh, great! I didn't know Trader Joe's made a version of that. That's good.
Can't do without it.
Yeah, totally. It's good stuff. Okay, so what we're gonna do is put aside our garlic, our oregano, and our spinach that we're gonna add to the leeks later, and because we're still letting our leeks cook down, and we're gonna make the kind of custard or base of the pie as well. So I need a large bowl. I just bought these bowls, and they have this kind of rubber bottom that stops them from slipping when you're stirring, and they're incredible. I love them so much. Okay, so to that, we are going to add our cottage cheese. Cottage cheese is one of those ingredients that I don't eat a ton of during the year, but when Passover rolls around, I eat I make up for lost time, let's just say that. It's a big part of my Passover life. So this is 4 cups of cottage cheese, which again, if you were making a smaller version of this, a 9 by 9 instead of a 9 by 13, you could use 2 cups, no problem, which is basically one package worth, 1 tub. And you can use full fat, 2%, whatever type of cottage cheese you like. For me, when you go too fat-free, you kind of lose some of the kind of richness and flavor, but it's totally up to you where you want to be with that. To that, I'm going to add the other secret ingredient of every Passover dish, which are eggs. This kind of binds the custard because you're going to be making this baked dish, and it needs to hold together. So the recipe calls for 4 eggs, but I'm just going to use 3 of them here. And the 4th one we're going to reserve for our egg wash on the top a little bit later. So I just need 3 of those. And let's see what else. Hold on, let me just rinse my fingers. That's what I need. I need an automatic Rube Goldberg machine that would crack all my eggs for me, because it always gets a little bit messy. Okay, so I'm also going to add a 1/4 cup of milk to this, which I did not pre-measure because it's Sunday and I'm not as on the ball as I normally am, but here we are. Do a 1/4 cup of milk.
Eileen, is it okay to interrupt with a question or only in the chat?
I think we're in such a small group that it's totally fine if you want to do that.
So I would say we should feel like we're all in the kitchen together. So go on. Yeah.
Okay. So I really am a cook, but leeks are a whole different thing. I don't suppose there's anything else you would use.
Yeah, you could use all onions if you wanted to. You would just use maybe three onions instead of 3 leeks.
Perfect.
It will have a different flavor. The leeks really do have kind of a more, maybe what I would do is do 2 onions and 2 bunches of scallions, because scallions have a flavor that's a little sharper, a little closer to a leek.
Got it.
And that would probably kind of mimic it pretty well.
Do you ever see cleaned leek? I haven't been in a store in a year, so I don't know. Do you ever see cleaned leeks?
They're probably out there. I can't think off the top of my head of seeing them, but I'm sure they exist. But honestly,
I can just get over my anti-leaf.
If you slice them and put them in the colander and then rinse them, it's a lot easier than trying to get all the grit out. And if you're, when you're doing a braised leek and you're using the whole thing, kind of an elegant halved leek, it doesn't work. But when you're doing slice, you can just do it that way.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. I shy away sometimes from things like making homemade pesto because I'm like, I don't want to have to deal. I have 2 kids. I don't want to deal with cleaning a bunch of fresh basil. So, okay. So to my cottage cheese and my eggs and my milk. This is like a dairy fest, but again, this is a very springy dish. It's when all the animals traditionally would be having babies and having their new milk supplies. So it's why these dishes are all very dairy heavy. We are going to crumble in 1 cup of feta cheese, which is a very, Sephardic, Turkish, Greek ingredient. And if you are dairy free and if you're vegan or if you're somebody who doesn't want to eat a meat mina or a dairy one, you probably could make a delicious one, using just eggs and the vegetables, and it would still taste really good. Maybe a little tomato sauce or something. You could kind of construct your own mina, because I know everybody these days either has a food sensitivity or they love somebody who does. So, I want my recipes to be as, accessible as possible. Okay, so we're going to add that all together. And then we're going to do 1/2 teaspoon of finely grated lemon zest. I use a microplane like this, but you can also use just a regular old, here, I'm going to show you, box grater. If you can use the very fine side. That will work as well if you don't have a microplane. But lemon zest is the sunshine of my life, and it's like the best, most delicious thing you can add to anything dairy, anything springy, any salad dressing that you want to kind of give a little bit of extra joy to. So I highly recommend getting one of these microplane graters. You can also use it for a really kind of fluffy Parmesan. It's good for nutmeg if you do fresh nutmeg in your baking. So it's worth having. I didn't measure a 1/2 teaspoon if you want to measure, but it's usually somewhere between 1/2 and a whole lemon. Okay, so just so you can see, I'm going to show this to you. My leeks have now cooked down. They were filling up the whole pan. Now they're starting to get a little brown. I'm going to let them go for about another minute, and then I'm going to add my other ingredients, and we're going to layer this pie and get moving. Okay, so I have everything I need, I believe, except for salt and pepper. Yes, so I'm going to do a 1/2 teaspoon of kosher salt into my cheese mixture. And ignore me for not measuring, but I have at this point, after testing hundreds of recipes, I kind of know what a 1/2 teaspoon of salt looks like. Although I have to say, I know somebody, I would never do this, but she was a chef and she got tattooed on her hand a little circle that said 1/2 teaspoon and then a larger circle that said a teaspoon. And so she could literally just put it in her hand, and she had like her measuring cup in her hand. And I think that's really amazing, even though it's beyond something that I would do.
That is awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So I just added some pepper as well. And we're going to just give that a good stir. My God, it already smells like Passover in my house. That's giving me a little bit of anxiety because there's all the cleaning that still has to happen. But it's okay. We live in this like limbo state the week leading up to Passover, where like the matzah and the flour are sort of like in the kitchen but not interacting, and it just kind of feels like a dueling banjos situation. Okay, so I'm gonna put the oregano and the garlic that I chopped into the pan. Give it a stir. It only needs to cook. I'm gonna turn off the heat because there's so much residual heat in the pan. I'm just gonna stir that together, which will soften the garlic. Oh my God, it smells incredible. That is the one thing Zoom has not figured out, is how to get smell-o-vision. Okay. Yeah, it's very, very delicious. Okay, and now what we're gonna do is we're gonna assemble the pie. So I have our little baking dish from before. And what I like to do is grab a second baking dish or a small bowl and fill it with water. Because if you've never made matzo lasagna before, you know that it works better when you soften your sheets of matzah. So what we're going to do, just want to make sure I get the order of this right. It's been at least a year since I made this for obvious reasons. It is very, very delicious, but I don't make it off usually not during Passover because there's so many other things to eat. But I'm going to take 3 sheets of matzah. I'm going to break the middle one and I'm going to hide it, and you're all going to find the afikomen later. No, I'm just joking. I'm going to dip it into my water here. And I don't want it to get completely waterlogged. I just want it to soften for a few seconds. I say 2 to 3 minutes. I don't even think it needs quite that long, especially because I'm not going to bake mine tonight. I'm going to wrap it and bake it tomorrow because I'm on East Coast time. So it's 9:30 here and I don't want to deal with waiting for a minute to cool before I can put it in my fridge. Hello from the future. It's like my other favorite thing about Zoom is that you can be Zooming with people from many, many different time zones at once. Okay.
Well, actually, that's a really great tip in terms of making it ahead. So if someone wanted to make this ahead, kind of 2 questions. One being if they got up to the end of the step and then put it in the fridge, baking it the next day, or let's say they wanted to freeze it and then bake it, would they freeze it pre-baking or bake it then freeze it?
This one,
if someone had this much room in their freezer for a 9 by 13, yeah, 11 by 13.
A lot of people have their second freezers and refrigerators, and that comes in handy. I think you could refrigerate or freeze this one prior to baking. I actually think it would work either way, but I would do it prior to baking so that when you bake it, it's baked fresh.
And then would you do the final egg wash before baking it? Like, would that be like before it finally goes in?
Yeah, I probably would let it come to something close-ish to room temperature, or not quite, but just I would let it like thaw a little bit, and then I would make it.
Got it. Cool.
Yeah.
So for all of you people thinking about making ahead, prepping on Friday for Saturday, or doing something midweek, that's a good option.
Totally. I completely forgot to add my spinach. So if you guys were following along on the recipe at home, you probably were feeling very nervous for me, but don't worry, I'm going to add it right now. The nice thing about spinach is it wilts in a matter of seconds under heat. So you're going to start with, it calls for, I think, a 5 ounces, which is usually one of the like plastic clamshell-y containers. And it's going to look like too much, but when you add it, you will see it wilts down very, very quickly. And will cook right in. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to cover our first layer. I'm just giving a good stir to my cheese to make sure all of the salt, pepper, and lemon zest is equally dispersed. We're going to cover this with about half of the cheese mixture. This is a very similar process now to if you're making a matzo lasagna. In fact, I would say that minas are the original matzo lasagna. Before we all think we're doing something really cool when we make matzo lasagna, but we're just taking a note from Sephardic cuisine. And I love I have to say the name mina. It comes from the Ladino word, which is for folks who aren't familiar with Ladino, it's like the Sephardic version of Yiddish. It's the vernacular language that combines like Hebrew and Spanish. So the Ladino word for this dish is a mina, and it basically means, it's the Ladino word for mine, not mine as in it belongs to me, but mine as in to excavate. And you can tell when you're looking at this dish, there's going to be layers, you're going to be excavating. So it's kind of one of those lovely names. It just also sounds pretty on its own. Okay, so I'm going to add now half of my leek mixture, and going to spread that out evenly. It's so verdant. It feels like a garden. in the baking dish. Okay, and then I'm going to repeat the process. I had these ones softening while I was working on the first layer. And you can kind of, if you have to like, matzahs, most recipes call for like a matzah sheet, but matzah sheets are actually different sizes depending on what brand you're using. These ones got a little waterlogged because I had them hanging out for longer, so I'm going to let them drain off. But if you have to break the sheets in half and kind of layer them on like that, that's totally fine. It will come out. And I'm just going to soak my last 3 sheets and then repeat the process. So it's the remainder of my cheese mixture. I'm going to have to find a way to freeze this, and we'll eat it during Passover because otherwise, or find some neighbors who want to eat a matzah pie right now. Okay, so we're just going to smooth that out. And again, if you were doing half, you would use fewer matzah sheets, obviously, and you could easily do it in a 9 by 9-inch pan like this one, and it would totally come out. It does call for 3 large leeks, which are, it's hard to, obviously do like 1 1/2 and have half a leek. So you could do like 1 large leek and 1 smaller leek, and it would work out that way. Okay, and so we're gonna use the final bit of our spinach and leek mixture. One of the things, I've been writing about Jewish food now for almost 15 years, which is kind of crazy when I think about it. And one of the things that I have loved kind of witnessing happening over the last, I would say, decade is really there's a kind of cross-cultural exchange within Jewish cuisine where you're starting to see Ashkenazi families turning obviously to Middle Eastern cuisine, turning to Sephardic cuisine to find ways to kind of enliven their tables. And you're even seeing it from Sephardic families like making babka for the first time, or making hamantashen, or whatever it is. So I love that there's a little bit of cross cultural stuff going on there. Because when I was growing up, like maybe you would see hummus on the table at an Ashkenazi family, and now it's as standard as if it was always there. It was part of the next to the chopped liver. So I just think that's really lovely. Okay, so we're gonna finish up with this dish, and then our second dish is super fast. So we will just make that one in a jiffy. So I have my 2 sheets of matzah, and I'm breaking my 3rd softened matzah sheet. And you see it fits really nicely into the casserole dish. And it's going to, depending on the contours of your 9 by 13 or your 9 by 9, again, like if you have to break things, it's totally fine. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take our remaining egg, and we're just going to give it a quick whisk. And I will say, like, I'm blabbing during making this, but when you're making it at home, it actually comes together really quickly. So it's the kind of dish that's nice to kind of make ahead. It doesn't take very long, and then you can kind of have it when you need it. Okay, so we are going to brush the egg generously over the top. Matzah is already nice and golden brown, so you're not going to necessarily be looking for a super deep change of color, but you're going to want to see some bubbling of the under layers of the mina, the excavation layers, and it will puff up a teeny tiny bit, and that's how you'll know it's ready. But what I'm going to do after this demo is I'm going to wrap this in foil and stick it in my fridge, and I'm going to bake it tomorrow morning. But if you were baking it right now, you would stick it in your in your oven, and bake it until bubbling, about 45 minutes. And then, like any kind of pie, you want to take it out of the oven and let it stand for 10 or 15 minutes before you cut it, because it allows kind of the molten inner layers to kind of come back together and re-solidify. And when you serve it, I like to sprinkle it with a little bit of parsley. You could put a little basil. It's not a traditional flavor, but it would be a nice combination. You could also change up what you want in here. You could do a mina with sauteed mushrooms. You could do a mina with really anything that, any herbs or whatever that sounds good to you. So let me just go ahead and quickly show you. Again, this is what it looks like at the table, if you can see. And it comes from Little Book of Jewish Feasts.
Will you give us the tutorial for like the leftovers of this? So you make it, you have it at your Seder, it goes in the fridge. So the next day when you want to cut a chunk off, are you heating it up, eating it straight from the fridge? Is it good any way you like it?
Yeah, it is good cold. I've eaten it cold. I like to warm it up a little bit. You can warm it up in the oven. If you're in a rush, you can warm it up even in the microwave. It gets a little soggier, but it still tastes really good that way. But yeah, I feel like warm or room temperature is ideal for this dish, so I would warm it up. It should last 4 to 4-ish days in your fridge covered. But you could also, again, you could freeze it after you bake it if you have leftovers. I would pre-slice it and freeze it that way, so that it's easy to kind of heat and serve.
Have you ever added a sauce of any kind on top when you serve it?
Like a tomato sauce?
Well, I mean, I often do a salsa. I just made chili cheese squares for company, and I did a mango salsa with it. So I'm used to doing that.
Delicious.
I don't know about that on this, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely play around with different sauces. Pesto would be nice. Store-bought. Again, I'm not washing basil at home right now.
Yeah.
But pesto would be nice. Marinara sauce would be nice. I mean, it's just cheese and leeks. So, and the meat version of a mina is, again, it's a kind of tomatoey lamb cinnamony dish. So the marinara sauce or the tomato sauce from that one would transfer over really well to this one. But I definitely encourage you to make it. It's, even if you're scaling it down to a 9x9, it's a really it's delightful. You could add dill if you love the flavor of dill. For Passover especially, I feel like dill is kind of one of the power herbs for Ashkenazi Jews. So it'd be kind of a way of nodding. It's used a lot in Greek cuisine also. But it would be a nice way to kind of play around with the flavors. However you want to do it. So are there any other questions about the mina before we move on to the next dish? Eileen?
I'm just scrolling through to see if anyone dropped anything in the chat, which I don't at the moment, but I was already texting my mom on the side, making sure we have leeks for this coming week. So my question was in a private chat to my mom just to make sure we had everything we needed to make this. It looks awesome.
Amazing. Yeah.
And I know Audrey Levine says this looks terrific. She's going to make it next week. Awesome. Yeah. Anyone that makes it, let us know. Send us a picture. We'd love to see it.
Totally. Yeah. It's a really fun dish. Okay.
That was definitely a dish that looks a lot harder than it is. That's like a showstopper kind of casserole style where you if you were taking it somewhere, it's really impressive.
Yeah, it does have a kind of grand vibe to it. So great. Okay, so I guess we'll move on. Let me clear off all of this stuff and put it in the very, very large kitchen that's just off of the screen. No, I don't have a very large kitchen. I live in Brooklyn. I have a very small kitchen. You pretty much see the entire thing. And yes, I develop all my recipes in this tiny kitchen. So if I can do it in my kitchen, where I occasionally have to use the floor as a counter because I've run out of counter space, then you can do it in your kitchen. I promise. Okay, so this next recipe is barely a recipe. It's more of an idea, and it comes from when I was growing up. My mom can vouch for this. The dessert tray for Passover always had chocolate dipped figs. Sorry, chocolate dipped apricots, which is one of my absolute favorite things. So when I was developing Modern Jewish Cooking, this one came out in 2015, which is a really long time ago now. It's 6 years ago. I can't believe that. But it's still, I think the recipes still feel quite modern and relevant. I was like, how can I update that childhood favorite? And so I decided to do a chocolate dipped fig recipe because dried figs and chocolate are a match made in heaven, and you sprinkle them with a little bit of flaky sea salt. You can sprinkle them with cinnamon or with cayenne if you like spice, anything you like. And they're super, super quick to make. And there's just something sort of magical about the combination of figs and chocolate that, I mean, I usually now, when I'm making them, I do some apricots and I do some figs, and I also do chocolate dipped, I peeled clementine. Chocolate dipped clementines are so good because you get this like juicy kind of explosion from the fruit and the chocolate shell. It's a really, really good combo. So we're going to do both of those tonight. So I have flipped over my cutting board and rinsed off my knife, so we're good to go. So basically all you need is 2 ounces of bittersweet or semi-sweet, whatever, any kind of sweetened baking chocolate. This is the fancy stuff, Scharkenberger, but anything, it's not kosher for Passover, so anything you have works, but you do want to find one that is a nice quality, because the chocolate is really one of the main stars of the dish, and so you don't want to skimp on the chocolate part. And I'm just giving it a very rough chop, and if I wasn't on camera, I would be like sneaking pieces of it, but I'm going to hold off on doing that. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to throw it into, I think this is microwave safe, yes, in a microwave safe bowl. You could melt this in a double boiler on your stove, but I find it just takes almost the same amount of time as doing it in the microwave, and you end up derbying multiple dishes, and there's no reason to do that. So if you have a microwave, go ahead and use it. And the trick when you're microwaving chocolate, now we're not doing anything fancy with this chocolate. We're not tempering it or, doing anything to make it, to bring it up to temperature slowly. So they're not going to be like what you see in a chocolate shop. They're not going to have that sheen or that whatever, but they're plenty beautiful all on their own. So I'm going to do this at 20-second intervals. And what you do is you melt the chocolate and you give it a stir in between each interval, because you don't want your chocolate to seize up. If it gets too hot too fast, it will kind of it gets these little like crystals in it, and they're not delicious. So you can scorch chocolate, and you obviously want to avoid that. And it usually takes a couple of goes. Like you can already see the chocolate is melting a little bit, but I still have big chunks. And so what you're going to do is you're going to melt it until it's basically melted, but you have a few chunks still left in it. And then you're just going to stir to get the rest of it to melt in the kind of residual heat of the hot chocolate. And make sure you take it out of your microwave with something so that you don't burn yourself like I just did. And in the meantime, we're going to prep what we are going to dip. Let me see where we're at here. Okay, we're getting some good melting action here. You can see we are closer. I'm going to do just 10 more seconds because I think we're in pretty good shape, but I still have some chunks. You can see how quick this dish is. It literally takes 5 minutes to make, and then about 10 minutes in your refrigerator to set, and you're good to go. So if you if you tried to make coconut macaroons, or you tried to make meringues and it just completely failed, and you're like, I don't have a dessert for Passover, this is an amazing dessert to kind of have in your back pocket. Okay, I think we're going to be good to go here. Yes. So we have nice melty chocolate. I still have a few chunks left in, but I'm going to stir them up. And that is as easy as it gets. Okay. And again, resisting the urge to lick the spoon, but you don't have to when you're making them at home. I'm going to put away my cookbook because I don't need it. The recipe is pretty much done at this point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take just a regular old plate to kind of pop the finished ones on. And you're going to take figs. You can use any variety of fig that you really like. You can use Black Mission or is it Calamurna, or really anything that you find. And if it got a little squashed in transit in the package, I kind of just like plump them up on my hand by pressing them against the heel of my hand. And then you're just going to take them and dip the bottoms. So decadent, so easy. And you're going to lay them sideways on your plate so that most of the chocolate is exposed. And you're just going to repeat that. You can scale this recipe up or down infinite, however much you want. If you're serving a crowd maybe next year, you can triple it. If you're just serving yourself, you can melt just a tiny bit of chocolate. You can even use chocolate chips. I mean, there's other ingredients in chocolate chips that when you melt them, kind of makes it a little cloudier than using regular baking chocolate. But if you're just serving them for yourself, this is a really good, like, I have a sweet tooth late at night and I need a quick snack dessert to make. So you can do however you want. And then I'm also going to do some of my clementines. And I like to kind of dip. Oops, I dropped that one. That's okay. That one's going to have a lot of chocolate on it. That doesn't hurt anybody. And we're just going to dip those. My family, my husband and my 2 kids and I did chocolate fondue for New Year's this year. And I realized that it's actually fondue is like a very pandemic unfriendly dish, and that you're all sharing a bowl of chocolate and dipping stuff in together. It doesn't matter because we live together anyway, and we're all sharing our germs anyway. But it just made me think, like, wow, there's all these joys of life that COVID has taken away from us, and fondue is one of them. But this is a kind of a good way to get that same idea. But I have to say, if you have any 6-year-olds in your life, fondue is a winner.
Adding it to the list.
Yeah. Oh, you do? Your daughter's 6, right?
Yeah, my little munchkin. Yeah, that's so funny.
Yeah, it's a great Passover thing to do as well. How can you go wrong? Okay, so I'm not going to dip all of them because I think you get the idea by now. But what I like to do to finish it is I just get a little bit of flaky sea salt. I'm actually just using kosher salt right now. It works as well, but for presentation, I would use a flaky sea salt, and just the teeniest little bit on the chocolate side. You don't want these to taste salty, but there's something about the contrast of the little pop of salt and the chocolate and the figs. It's more than the sum of its parts to the extreme. So I'm going to put these in the refrigerator for about 10 minutes, and they will harden up, and then they're ready. They're ready to snack on. And they're not quite grand enough to be like a show-stopping dessert, but on Passover, especially when you are entertaining, it's really nice to have just like a few little nibbles on the dessert platter. So you have your flourless chocolate cake, and you have your macaroons, and you have maybe your I don't know, whatever else you love. And these are sort of the equivalent of having the chocolate covered jelly rings from Joyva, but the fresh version. So yeah, so that one, again, like, I hope it is something that you try. It's good on Passover and throughout the year. And yeah, are there any other questions that have come up?
So let me remove the spotlight so we can see on the gallery view. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute or let us know what you plan on making this week, or if you plan on trying one of these recipes. We'd love to hear from you.
I would love to hear that. Sure.
So it's me again. Sorry.
It's our private cooking class, me and Bonnie now.
Yeah. I'm having such a good time. I'm going to go along with Leah. Only Leah, I want you to come to my kitchen because that is too small a kitchen for you. I feel so bad.
I agree.
Anyway, you're amazing that you can do it. Two things. I actually made a cream cheese brownie tart today for Passover that'll have a chocolate glaze and chocolate chip strawberries on it with matzo cake flour. My question is a little off topic. I love Sam Sifton, another one of my Jewish favorite food people. And what do you think of his no recipe shtick that he's touting?
Yeah, I mean, look, so for folks who aren't familiar, Sam Sifton, who runs the New York Times cooking site, just put out a collection of, I guess it's a recipe collection, but he calls it No Recipe Recipes. So it's encouraging people to cook from their intuition and without recipes. I haven't actually seen it, so I don't know how he presents that. But you know, for me, I'm anything that gets people feeling more confident in the kitchen is a good thing. Some people really cling to recipes, and that's why when I'm developing a recipe for my book or for you know, one of the many like articles that I do, they usually have recipes at the end. I try really hard to make the recipes very specific and that they'll guide you, but also that they feel like there's someone just talking you through it in your kitchen rather than it being super scientific feeling, even though that's on the back end. But you know, I love the idea of a book that sort of encourages people to get more creative, to, you know, cook from their guts. My guess is it's a recipe book, or it's a cookbook for people who maybe are not beginners. Maybe he would say otherwise, but for me, when I first started cooking 20 years ago now, like I really needed recipes and I really relied on them. And now I would love that book because it would give me good ideas, which is yeah. So but yeah,
Thank you.
for sure. Oh, someone said a beware about it. He suggested a cheesy polenta for Passover without any mention of Ashkenazi versus Sephardic. Yes, this is something that the New York Times has some issues with. They just also Sam Sifton, I like him a lot, but he suggested for Nowruz, which is the Persian New Year, that people eat Fhaidon, which is this like very rich chicken and walnut dish. And he got all this like flack in the comments from Persian people or Iranian people saying like, that's not what you eat for Nowruz. You have fish and fresh herbs because it's spring. So the New York Times sometimes has a little bit of a problem with like cultural references. And it happens a lot where they'll have like a rice dish for Passover and they won't mention that there are people who don't eat rice because it's kitniot. So you have to kind of take some of that stuff with a grain of salt. But yeah.
Take it with a grain of kitniot.
With a grain of kitniot. And obviously no judgment on anybody who, if you eat bread on Passover, if you eat kitniot, if you don't, wherever you land on the spectrum, as long as you're enjoying yourself and enjoying the holiday, I think that's what matters most.
Well, I know we have a few minutes left, so if there's anyone else that has any questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you. I'm just scrolling back through to see if there were other ones in the chat here.
Well, one thing I will say in the meantime is normally when I do events in person, which I guess it's not normal because it's been a year since I've done one in person, I usually sign books after the event. And because I can't do that right now, what I say is obviously no one's obligated to buy a book ever, but if you do buy a book, I am very findable. On my website is my email, and you can also find me on Instagram. So if you want, if you're giving it to your, your friend that you're not able to be with for the Seder, or if you're giving it to your relative or even for yourself, I'm happy to mail you a little book plate that you can, I'll sign and you can stick into the book. So I just wanted to, thank you that's my website. And then this is my Instagram for anybody who's on Instagram. You can always connect with me and I would be happy. In the last month, I've sent out 20 book plates for people who buy books, and it just gives it that little bit of personal edge. So just wanted to offer that.
Awesome. Well, I know it's late where you are, and I know that there's a few other people that may have some questions, but in the meantime, I will end the recording. And so we can end that part of it. And if anyone wants to stay on and ask anything, you're more than welcome. And thank you guys all so much. This was amazing for us in San Diego, our friends in Ventura, and people that are tuning in from all over. So thank you again for joining us. And